Hi, I'm Kathryn.
And I'm Theresa.
And we are the co-authors of the book, Pass the Baton, Empowering All Music Students.
Our goal is to share stories of educators who are passing the baton and empowering their music students. We want to help teachers create music lessons that transform students from passive consumers to vibrant creatives. Welcome back to the Pass the Baton podcast. We're here to talk about all things student empowerment and music education. Before we introduce today's guests, we want to remind you to follow or subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss any future episodes.
In addition, if you like what you hear today, please consider leaving a rating or review. That's what helps podcasts like Pass the Baton grow. Theresa, I really enjoyed this episode this week because I could really relate with making a mission statement. I make a mission statement and review it at the beginning of the year, post it, and I really love how it forces me to grow throughout the year. And Kevin talks today about how he does that with his own students in his band program.
Oh, I know. It was really, really inspiring to think about how he uses that mission statement to give the kids a voice. He helps them to take ownership of the program. So it's not like it's his, Kevin's, the band director's program, but it's all of their program. The kids feel like they have ownership. And really, they're just empowered throughout the whole thing. Okay, welcome back, everybody. We're really excited to be joined today by Kevin Feher. I was listening to a podcast of his, actually. Kevin was being interviewed on his own podcast, and he started talking about some topics that really just excited me, having to do with mission statements, goal settings, and how we can incorporate those things with students. So we're really excited to have him here today. So Kevin, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Course. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and maybe what you're up to these days teaching wise?
Yeah, sure. So I, in the grand scheme of things, I didn't make it far from where I grew up. I went to pretty much from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. I am in the CB Council Rock area of PA. I did music, did all of the festivals, the county things. So I hopped around the county. And then when I wanted to go for music, the farthest I got was I wanted to try something new. So I went to Duquesne for my undergrad. I knew very quickly I'm not a city person. So it was great for 4 years. And then I knew that I was out of the city and I was past the city. And then I came back to this area after, and I've kind of floated around. I graduated, it's scary to say, in 2010. So we're about 12 years through, and I've kind of had a handful of different jobs. I've done everything from K through 5 general music, elementary strings, middle school strings. But then the most current and the landing place for the foreseeable future is I'm at the high school in Penn Ridge School District. Been there for, I think we did the math the other day. This is my 7th year there doing the band. And then I have a guitar, music tech, and electronic keyboarding. So a few other classes, but the primary bulk of it is the marching, jazz, and symphonic concert band stuff.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think one thing you talked about on the podcast was this idea of a mission statement. And every year I connected with that because every year I make myself a mission statement, or at least review a mission statement for myself and post it somewhere for me to look at throughout the year. But you do it with your students, which is really interesting and fascinating. So could you tell us a little bit about what that looks like?
So I can't completely take credit for parts of it because the initial idea came from when I was a senior in high school. I had a new band director, and one of the first things he had us do, and actually I ended up on his staff for a while after the fact. So I don't think we did it the first year he was there, but when I was on staff, he started working with kids to write some semblance of a mission statement. And when I got to the high school that I'm at now, what you realize when you're on the teaching side of it that you maybe don't realize when you're a student is this massive idea of legacy that follows the high school. And you could be taking over for someone that was there for 4 years. You could be taking over someone there that's for 12 years. And they have a fundamental different idea of what the band is or what the band should be. And to me, I think what I took that in was that I'm just a person there, and this community and these kids, they're what makes up the group. So I have different philosophies of competition than they did initially. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to root everything we did in the communal idea of it, because if I'm trying to educate them and they're trying to win something, we're just going to butt our heads the entire time. So I got to a point, the first year was kind of survival. Like I did this maybe halfway through the first year. I was just trying to not drown the first year. And then when we got towards the end of it, I sat down I kind of left it as an all call. I asked most of my student leaders to be there, but then I said anyone else in anything marching band related, because marching band's not necessarily small, but I started small with just marching band. And I said, anyone in marching band's welcome to come. And we sat down and I said, I want you to tell me what it means to be a marching ram, which is our mascot. And it starts very slow and it starts very uncomfortable. But the thing that you notice is when you ask those questions, I mean, and we've all been there where like, if you're not the most successful band or not the most successful football team, people make jokes and they go, well, we're the last place soccer team or we're the last place this. But when you ask them what it means to be a member of it, no one ever goes, it means that you don't meet expectations. They always say, it means to be like responsible and it means to be strong and empowered in these things. So what happened was we had this conversation. We just started writing ideas on the board. And as you start to write, you start to see a bunch of different words for a bunch of different things, but it starts to dial down into a few key components to it. So what we did from that was I took all of those ideas, we took a picture of the board, and then we started writing statements of belief statements. So it always starts with, we, the Penn Ridge Marching Rams will, and then it's, what are these phrases and what are these components of things that we complete and we achieve? And then with the leaders, we kind of started to make these statements and we went, if we use these three, because we didn't want it to be a whole page. We said, if we can dial this down into three, does this concisely explain what it means to be a Ram? And part of the reason I wanted to be shorter is because I'm a firm believer in the communal idea of music. I don't like the competition side. And I think that if they try and compete, like if Kathryn's not pulling her weight and Theresa knows it, and then Theresa gets on her back and then Kathryn's upset because Theresa's doing it, it just becomes volatile. Mm-hmm. But if it's a unification idea and Theresa goes to help Kathryn as instead, it's just a better mentality and mindset. So I wanted it to be a shorter mission statement because we dismiss with it every day. So it's something that they are expected to ingrain in themselves. So we can say it every day. And then it's nice because it becomes their identity. So like if, same example, if Kathryn's not holding her weight and she's not doing that, it's easier to someone go, if you say the mission statement and you say you're supposed to be prepared and principled, you need to actually do that. You're not doing it. And it's just it's a good accountability measure and it gives them an identity.
Did the kids buy into this idea? Were they hesitant? How did that go?
They loved the writing of it. They were all for it and they liked kind of getting those ideas. I think when I started to turn it into a dismissal, that was a slightly harder element of the buy-in. And I would say that the buy-in was not something that if I would have attacked head on, it would have worked. It was one of those things where this is a dismissal that maybe 20% of the kids really, really believed in, and the staff knew that it was the right thing. So we kept doing it. And then as they started to find success in other ways, you can feel a little bit more of the group start to internalize it and believe it. And now it's this cool thing. I said we're about 5 years past having written it. And now if they watch an end of the year video or they see a video of one of their practices and they hear any of the words in it, it just becomes this chaotic thing where they have to say the whole thing. And they do the whole stereotypical, after they do the mission statement, the drum majors always do the, how are your feet together, stomach, they do that whole chant. And it becomes this like minute long thing anytime anyone says anything in the mission statement. And so I can't say that they all bought in right away, but it worked pretty well. So I think they buy in more than they like to admit because they make fun of me because I always make, so to Kathryn's point, this is not something I do every year. Like we did a mission statement and this is it. But then what I do is each year, the student leaders and I, when we have some leadership training sessions with them, we talk about what the motto of the year is. Mm-hmm. And we try and cycle it around the show we're doing. So for example, the one year we did Newsies. So it was Seize the Day. And then we did a flight show and I'm a movie person. So my favorite was the Superman poster said, "You'll believe a man can fly." So it was like, you'll believe that you can fly. And it was these mottos. And I buy 250 business cards for like $10 at Staples. And it has the mission statement on one side. And on the other side, it has the logo and the motto for the show. And they get it the first day of band camp. And they make fun of me because it's a business card and it's ridiculous, but then they're in people's wallets and they're in people's cases and folders and they're everywhere. So it works. I think they like to tease the fact that it's a business card and not some Instagram thing or something, but they like it a lot.
It's really neat.
Yeah.
So you use essentially the same mission statement every year. But that really, it sounds like it helps build the identity of that group. And that's so important. So I remember you talking also about some like goal setting things that you do with the kids. Can you get into that?
Yeah. So I love reading anything for ideas, whether it be leadership books, sports books, coaching books, things like that. And I very rarely make it far through books because I can get like 10 pages in and go, that's an awesome idea. And then I go away and try and do it. And it becomes a whole thing. But the one that has stuck with me the most, I'm trying to look around to see if it's here. It's probably in my office at school. It's called You Win in the Locker Room First. And it's John Gordon is this great like sports. He has a bunch of books with coaches and different people. And he kind of finds these good leadership people and co-writes books with them. And he did this book, You Win in the Locker Room First, with an NFL coach. And he said one of the flaws in a lot of groups that people use right now is if you ask what their goal is, they say to win the championship. And they said that's an irrational goal because, and I'm a soccer person, so if anyone's listening to this and they're a football person, they're going to be real offended. I don't know how many teams there are in the NFL. Let's say 32. I don't know if that's right. If you say your goal is to win the Super Bowl, you have 31 out of 32 teams at the end of the season fail. And that's not a great metric. And it's certainly not a great metric when you're teaching students and children. So one of the things the book talks about is they said, if we can't put that at the goal 1, maybe that's goal 20. And goal 1 might be stop this many, or like this is the football analogy where it falls apart in my brain, like stop this or keep their rushing yards under this number or complete this many passes. So from a marching band perspective, winning for us was not a rational thing because we had so many elements that we were pulling in and we were trying to fix. And I think we did the math. By my 5th year, I was the longest running director there for about 5 directors. So it kind of had this like feeling of just a revolving door. So there was no gauge on, you couldn't build anything. There wasn't a staff that stayed there for marching band. So what we said is, what do we need to achieve? And when we designed the show, we want them to have a music score of this. And we wanted to make sure they moved this much and they understood how to do pliés and tendus and all of these ballet ideas. So when we start to do choreography, I don't have to say, well, point your toe and your knee is straight. And it's this, I can just say tendu and do this, and they can do it. So we made our goals our vocabulary for what to do. And then once you got maybe 10 goals in of all those vocabulary and fundamentals, then it became score this by halfway through our season, or finish in the top 3. But those are like our 20th goal, and they see them on the list, and we really don't usually get there, but then they can go, but look at all the stuff we crossed off. And that's the nice thing of the goal setting, because it's not rational to say you're going to win the championship in any given year, especially in the world we live in now. Like there's so many curveballs and so many things that could happen. So I wanted them to appreciate how to set realistic goals for yourself that move you forward, not ones that feel like, yeah, but at the end of this, I didn't get to the championship and I didn't get to the finish line. Instead, they can go, well, this is how much progress I made. And then when we sit down for the next year and we goal set, we don't have to do tendu and this and this and this. So next year's goal 1 might have been this year's goal 10. And then it just kind of keeps moving the line this way as they go. And the nice thing about the mission statement and all of these goal setting things is now they're at a stage where even if the buy-in was a little questionable at first because the seniors that were helping write the mission statement and the goals were of past band directors. Now my kids have seen the very beginning of it to it being their identity. And now it's a buy-in, and now it's an expectation. And when freshmen come in, they know and they want to learn it faster than anyone else and do those things.
Yeah. I think you touched on it a little bit, but I guess what I was wondering when you were talking is like, what does that look like in a student, in a band student, from when you were kind of beginning this to now? Like what, I don't know, there are characteristics that they take on that are different, or what does the kid look like now going through all this?
So I think that one of the things that we look at most is the reason I chose to do music is because I love and believe in the communal idea of it and building something together. And I am very against this idea of pointing people out or singling people out and their mistakes and their flaws and how that's a detriment to it. And I tell kids as often as I can, and that was probably the hardest part of changing it, because that was kind of some of the culture where, again, like if we use, not to pick on Kathryn and say she's the one that it's wrong, but like if Kathryn's doing something wrong, the culture used to be Theresa would go over and yell and get mad for not doing it. And what we've tried to do with the mission statement and this idea of supporting each other is I try and teach the kids as they move through that, like, Theresa, your job is not to get mad at Kathryn. Your job is to see that she's struggling and help her before a staff member gets to her and goes, Kathryn, you're doing this wrong. And that role has been something that's been really hard to define with them, especially because even if they're not leaders, there's this moment, I don't know when it is, I want to say it's like mid-October, but there's a moment where almost everyone in the field, freshman or senior, automatically thinks, oh, I understand marching and I never make mistakes now. And they look around and they go, all of you make mistakes though, and I'll tell you all about them. And it becomes like there's like 100 teachers on the field and you just go, just stop, just help each other. Let us do that. And learning or helping them, I understand this idea of be a support system. Let us critique and let us be the teachers so we can have this better relationship has been really helpful. And it's starting to change quite a lot. The other thing I do, again, big on like symbols and ideas. So I do the mission statement as my one, and then I give the kids things and I come back to them over and over again. So with the mission statement, what we started this year, because I'm trying to add other things, is I don't remember on the other podcast if we talked about we have a mascot now. His name's Sam the Ram. And he's this little, like, he's this big. He's like maybe like 4 inches tall. He's like a little Beanie Baby kind of thing. And Sam goes home. I brought him during band camp, and Sam goes home with the student that is most exemplified the mission statement over the course of a week. And I tell the leaders the rule, and I don't say this out loud, but I tell them the idea is it will not go to any of you, because you taking this title of being a section leader or being a drum major, that's a responsibility that you earned, and that's a wonderful responsibility. But I expect you to show these mission statement concepts, not be rewarded for them. So then what's nice is they start to, when someone in their section is doing something great, they go, hey, can Sam go to this person this week, or Sam do this? So at the end of every week, we have, right before we do the mission statement, Sam goes from the person he was with to the new person. And it becomes this identification of we're all in this together and this is how we recognize it. And the kids have gone, Sam has an Instagram account. Sam has a tie because he went to homecoming. He has a marching band hat because he comes to games and he's like on the field on the chimes, or he's in people's backpacks during school. He took a math test with someone one day. Like, it's this awesome, wonderful thing. And then the other two that I do are, if you've never read the book, The Coffee Bean, I strongly encourage anyone to read The Coffee Bean. It's super fast. It's like a kid's book for adults. And the idea, general gist is, if you put a carrot in boiling water, it becomes soft. If you put an egg in boiling water, it becomes hard. And if you put a coffee bean in there, it makes coffee. So I give the kids at the beginning of every year, I give them 3 things. I give them the mission statement, I give them a coffee bean, and I tell them whenever things get difficult and things get tough, you have to be a coffee bean, and you have to remind people around you to be a coffee bean. And the third that was new this year is I love Ted Lasso, and I'm obsessed with Ted Lasso. And And there's this idea in Ted Lasso of this army man that Ted's son gave him a pack of army men. And he said, these guys can have your back. I give all the kids an army man as well. So then, and I buy them on like mass. I have like 300 of them in my desk. And then, so I give them to them at the beginning of the year. And I say, you have each other's backs. If you ever need something or you're struggling in school, you're struggling on the field, these are the people you pay attention to. And in those moments, to Kathryn's point, and this is why I love tangents, because I go too far. When kids are struggling or we're not modeling that mission statement, it is now as simple as I pull an army man out. And if there's, again, to keep using it, if Teresa's kind of giving Kathryn a hard time or something of this idea, I can walk by Teresa and just hand her an army man. And that's enough for them now to understand I need to pull back and I need to think about what I'm doing and how I'm doing it.
Mm-hmm. And I think it also really helps students who, first of all, I think maybe in a different experience, I might have felt like, if I'm the person who's struggling, there is no help for me. I don't know how to get out of this. And in this situation, there is a way to get out of it. First of all, I have a growth mindset. I have these goals that you're helping us set and probably scaffolding how I get there. So I have a path to get there. And now I have all of these, I have a community that can help me get there too. So I think it's so powerful for kids and rewarding kids with Sam as like, hey, you saw me. You saw I made strides this week. And that probably means a lot to somebody who's, trying to get better. I know that would be for me, like to feel heard and seen.
And I think that part of it too is that I think the middle, and this can be said for sports too. This isn't just band, this goes everywhere. I think the middle ground of the kids is really hard because you have your high flyers that will always excel. Mm-hmm. And they always have this impulse to look down and see, for lack of a better way of saying it, who's holding them back. And then you have the lower end on the achievement scale going, oh God, I hope they don't notice that I don't know what I'm doing. And they're not often encouraged today to walk across that middle ground and help each other out. And I think the little tiny symbols help because the people on the youngers and the people that are less experienced need to know that it's not a judgmental thing. The people there are to help them. And then at the same time, Sam, you're right. Like it allows them to feel seen because we try really hard. It never goes to someone in the same section. If you're an overt vocal leader, I try really hard to not give Sam to that person. I had the shyest kid in the world. He every single day after rehearsal, he would hold the door open for every single person that came in after we were done outside, to the point that staff and I were talking outside for about 15 minutes and we walked down the hill. You can't see the building where we practice. We came down the hill and he was still standing there waiting because we hadn't been there. He's mild mannered and he flies under the radar and he doesn't speak a lot. And he got Sam. He was one of the first people to get Sam because I want them to know that you might not feel like your contribution matches the person with the lead trumpet solo or the person with the drum solo, but it does. And you need to understand that it does. And that's the biggest thing about those. And when I look at how it benefits the kids, my favorite thing in the world is when most weeks I don't have to pick someone that Sam goes to. I have to tell people Sam will go to that person, but we have to wait because I have like 4 other people that already came to me with someone.
Wow. What I love about everything you're saying is something that we do hear a lot, but not usually in this context, relationships. Like the relationships that you have forged with the students and that they have with each other, that has to be strong for any of this to work. They would not have the buy-in for the mission statement. They wouldn't care about an army man. They like all of those things just wouldn't matter, but you have built that solid foundation. And that's awesome.
Yeah. It's been great. It's been wonderful to see. And I love music and I love what we do. And obviously I want to do it to the highest caliber they can, but it's not completely what they should be learning with us. And I understand that that's maybe not people's favorite thing to hear because people like to play the collegiate level things. And I certainly do too. But like how many of the kids in that room are going to go become professional musicians or teachers? Like they need to learn how to be empathetic and compassionate towards each other and to pick each other up. And also know that if you need to get picked up, there's somewhere and someone you can go to do it. And that to me that's what I put at the center of it. And I think it needs to be there for sure.
Yeah, we had an interview recently with Matt Claus, and he was talking about that same idea. The number of our students who are going to be professional musicians is small, and that's fine. We don't want them all to be professionals. We don't have room for that, right? The world doesn't have room for everyone to be a professional musician. But if we're treating them and teaching them to be just awesome musicians, amateur musicians, lovers of music and all of that, then we're really doing our jobs. I
love teaching the high school level because I can ask them when I have those random tangent days, I can ask them questions and they'll play. And also sometimes I know some of them go, oh, if we keep them talking, like we don't have to do as much today. But I saw a study the other day that talked about they surveyed students, and I think music was in the bottom 3 class subject areas that people found something that they had or felt like they had to take in schools. But then when they also surveyed what they value most in life, it's in the top 2. Mm-hmm. I can't found that. I don't know where I read it. I honestly don't. I'm really bad with that. I apologize. But like, it's this. So I asked the kids because they walk into school and they feel like, and this is where so many of their stressors come from, that for those 8 hours, everything I'm doing has to be a box that I check to go to college, to do the next thing. And if I don't do that, I'm scorned for it. And that's not what it should be. So I like when they learn that I feel like through the mission statement and through the symbols, they learn that it's okay to be with their friends and create something with their friends and enjoy it and appreciate it, even if it doesn't mean there's a first place trophy on the other side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah.
So if someone listening is thinking that they want to try something like this, they're listening to all of these great things you're talking about and they want to dip their toe in, where would you recommend they start?
I think that the mission statement is probably the best place to go, because some of the ideas and the concepts of those relationship building things over the course of the year, it can become nerve-wracking because you do have those moments where you feel like you're not moving fast enough or you're not getting done what you need to get done. So in the short term, it's really scary to do those things. But the mission statement, I think, is great to bring everyone together at the forefront of it and say, who are we and what are we supposed to do? And then I would say to people that even if they have, because some people's music departments have mission statements or their band programs already do, I would do this at the level of the mottos for the year. And sit them down and say, so like you can present the show, and this is mostly a marching band idea, but like if you present the show and you show them, you go, so what's our theme for this year? Or what do we want our goal to be this year? And make a motto that becomes their ownership kind of thing and moving forward with it. I think that the hardest part of it and the thing that's scariest is when you ask the kids what they want. Almost always, if they're not used to it, it's an uncomfortable amount of silence that comes, and you have to be okay with sitting in discomfort more than they're okay with it, because they are trained, if they don't fill the space of what it is, then you'll fill it for them. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, when we started the whole thing, it feels more pessimistic than I mean it to say it, but I didn't matter in the equation because I was infinitely more replaceable than the kids that were there and go to school there. So it had to come from them. So you have to give them the opportunity to build it. And obviously you can guide it and you can help, but like, I'm not a competitive person, but I had to ask my kids what they want, because if every single one of them said, we want to do the best we can and we want to compete and we want to do these things, I have to take that into account, because me as the educator, I'm never going to get this warm and fuzzy, like just loves life band if all they want to do is be cutthroat and win. So I have to know where they're coming from. So I would say give them a voice, and do it at a level that you're comfortable with. Like, don't make it a mission statement that changes the entire identity of your group. If you don't think you and your group have the same identity, make it a year-long motto of a goal, or build a goal together and allow them that.
Yeah. That's great advice.
I agree. I think when we say like we're going to ask kids what they think, we forget to say, but also something that you can live with too, right? Because the we is you and them. So what can we do together? And you have certain standards or things that you have to do. So it can't just be, one direction, but together, I think that's very reasonable, right?
And I think you have to keep in mind, I think this is a Simon Sinek thing that he talks about, the idea of be the last one to talk in the room, because I think you're right. The balance between what the students want and what you want is really, really important. But if you speak up too soon,
Sure,
then they will default to you, whether they agree or disagree, because in their mind and in the structure of the way the world works, it doesn't, at that moment, it won't matter what they think because the teacher said what they want. So you have, and again, it's hard. It depends how many people you have in the room, how many people are willing to talk and do those things. You need to try as best you can to make sure you've exhausted every person in the room's ideas, and then say, so I hear that you want these things and these things. From my perspective, what I would love to see is this. So as an entire band program or music program, what if these are our 3 goals? What does that look like to you? And allow them the opportunity to bargain and move or reshape or reframe ideas. But the moment the teacher speaks, most times they will stop having opinions, because they are, whether this is not like a right or wrong thing, they just, as soon as an adult starts to speak, they feel like they're trained to their moment of choice is done. And you want to try and dispel that as best you can.
Yeah. I mean, I know from when I wanted to shift in my own classroom, this idea of empowerment, for me, it was because my kids were like, Mrs. Finch, is this the right answer? Is this it? Like they were literally just looking for what I thought the answer should be. And I was like, that's not the kind of classroom I want to have, knowing that there aren't always one single right answer to things. Right. And I wanted their voice and their thinking involved in all of it too. So absolutely.
And you have to know your kids and how they approach it. So most of what I've done and how I've done with this, and I feel like I've had the most success and ground covered with it, is marching band, just because they're together so often. But I will say this year is where I have felt the most, this needs to become a part of everything that we're doing. And so symphonic band is our upper level group, and it's kind of taking the same shape. The problem there is the difficulty of what's expected and the reliance of each other on it is really hard. So it's kind of like a tough love thing. But one of the things I've started to say to them constantly is, look, I'm not giving you anything that you're not capable of. I know that you're capable of this, I said, but at a certain point, I can no longer help you do this. The answer to how you do this is you have to go home and you have to practice, or you have to do this for you. And I said, I've done my job. I've given it to you and I've taught you how to do it. I said, you have to now do yours and play it. And then you have those kids that are high flyers and they say, we want to play the hard stuff. We want to do this, but not everyone in the room is practicing. And you say, well, stop telling them that they're not practicing. How did you practice it? And they say, I break it down and I do this. I said, have you ever once turned to them and said, this is how you do it, or this is how you would help, or can I help with those things? And that this idea of this is a roadblock that we won't cross until everyone's ready to cross it. And I don't care if you're in line in the front and you're ready to go. Until you get everyone with you, we're not doing this. And it's, you have to keep an eye on them and make sure they're approaching it the right way. And you're like, what are you doing? Like, he won't let us play cooler things if you don't like practice this, so go home and do it. But they learn to help each other and they learn to do the right thing. And the people that are kind of finding the challenge in it know that they have to put the time in because people are relying on them. And that's a positive thing as well. Like, they need to know that even if I feel like low person on the pile, I am still valued. Like, I need to do my part.
Yep.
So one thing I think we've started to ask people lately is just this idea of how do you balance, it sounds like the things that you're talking about take time to develop and take time in your rehearsals to, to start those ideas. How do you balance that with with the high quality performances that have to be, put out? Or so how do you kind of make that balance with the kids?
That is probably the hardest question of all of it. And I would say it's definitely, it's a double-edged sword. And I remember pretty specifically, so my MusicCast co-host Marissa and I talked, Marissa and I used to be former colleagues, and I remember there's one specific rehearsal where I just thought, oh my gosh, we're not getting this part. And I sent her a text and said, do you think that you need to sacrifice quality if you're going to do these mission statement things? And it became this conversation back and forth with each other, because there are times where it feels like it feels like there is a much faster and more efficient answer if I just single one person out and say, you have been wrong every time, you need to fix this and you need to do it, or you sit this part out. The thing that I would ask and I would caution of people is, yes, in the short term, maybe that quality diminishes a little bit, but for the longevity of yourself as a human being and the program and the kids buy into it, I think you have to know that in the short term, it might feel like a slower climb, but you will not plateau as far. Like it's a really hard thing. And one of the first years we did the mission statement, I had a group of kids that were those, we want to compete, we want to do this, we want to do this. And I said, if you want to do that, like you need to make sure you're pulling your weight and you're doing these things. And unanimously, they were like, yes, that's what we want. That's what we want. And it was up until this past year, it was the most successful marching season we had. And I started every single day. I took a deep breath in my office and I said, never tell someone good job. Never tell anyone anything. And every time I would watch, I would see kids that struggled and I would see and go, that was awesome. They finally got that. And I would put it out of my mind and go, but they messed up. And I would finish and I would go, we did this wrong here. Trumpets did this. You have to make sure that articulation is correct. Go back to it again. And I never told them good job. And I never told them good job. And the thing I kept saying to staff is the fear of this is eventually anger and fear is going to run out. They're not going to be afraid of you anymore. They're not going to do this. And I hated myself. I despised me. Like I didn't want to be with me at all in marching band. And they had a wonderfully successful year, but then we finally sat down and I said to them, we like opened the mission statement back up. I had staff in there too. We all sat together and I said, this is not sustainable this way. And we had those open conversations of, why do you need to be scolded or yelled at to do this more? I said, what is not happening for you internally that makes you want to do this? And a lot of it comes down to like the belief of they can or they can't. And that's why I started doubling down on the community idea of things. It's because even if in a moment you feel like you can't, number one, coffee bean, like don't be a carrot. And number two, army man, like if you feel like you can't, there's people around you that can help you do it. So like, I won't lie to people to say that there's certain times over the course of the last year or two where I thought, man, I don't know if this is going to work. Like, I think I'm sacrificing quality for this building community thing. But we had this moment it was literally the same week I texted Marissa and I said, I don't know if this is feasible to do these things. We had like 20 seconds left of the show to finish. And our home show was the next day. And I was like, we wanted to put it on for the home show and we could not do it. And they were at each other's throats at certain moments. And we had to sit down. We brought the coffee bean back out. We brought the army man back out. And we said, we have to do this together and we have to do it the right way. Like we didn't get here this year by putting each other down. We did it by lifting each other up. And I said, stop filling the air with negative, and do positive. And all of a sudden, every single run back, it was a cheer. And every single time it was a this. And they finished the show. And literally, like it was October 6th or something like that. Nothing was happening. It was a Thursday night. It was meaningless for anyone other than us. And they finished the full run of the show for the first time. And kids broke down in tears, like out of joy. And it was this moment of, to your point, Kathryn, I spent so much time those couple weeks going, am I wrong? Am I sacrificing quality for this community thing? And am I wrong to do that? And then when you cross that threshold, all of a sudden it became, thank goodness we waited that little bit longer to not just go, like I could have gotten the solution on Monday just by yelling at 4 or 5 people and saying, do this better. And they would have done it, but they would have been petrified. And that's how the other kids would have known that's how you get results. And instead we just like stick with the uncomfortable for a little longer. And then it became everything to them. And they finished the show. I think they passed like their championship score from last year. And again, not a competition person. I really don't care about these things, but they loved these ideas. They crossed their championship score from the 2 years prior, pre-COVID, the first week of October. We had this moment where we thought, oh man, like they might actually be able to win that. And they didn't, because they went so far that they moved us to a different division and they just like full out pushed us higher. So like, and all of this trajectory was, from that moment on, the mission statement was never louder. They never cheered more for the SAM recipients. I saw coffee. I had kids come to me and ask for coffee beans to give their friends because they're having a hard time. And like, it became this moment of, we turned the corner. But I won't lie to you that you don't always see that corner. And there is a much quicker way to a high quality thing. But what I would ask is, what's your purpose in the school? Like, are you going to be measured, or do you feel value in putting on the best concert that happened that year? Or are you going to be measured in the fact that your children are moving on and like learning quality things that they can help support their families and their friends and the world in the future with things that they're learning with you? And that's a question that everyone has their own answer to. And I don't disparage anyone that has the answer of, I want to give them highest quality music possible. More power to you. That's totally fine. I just decided, and we talked a lot, staff and I talked, that's not what we're about. But the high quality comes, it just comes slower.
Yep. I mean, I think the lesson learned of lifting up other people, of what you said, if we can do it this way or this way. And that lesson of, when we lift people up, this is what can happen, is really awesome experience for those kids to see that happen. It's amazing.
Yeah.
That's going to last so much longer than any other lesson, any other memory. And who wants to just remember being yelled at? Like that's not
well. And they need to know that they can do it without that, because, we always talk about, I feel like an old person whenever I say like one day you're going to get to college, you're going to get to a job, and someone's not going to like help you with this, or they're not going to give you this, and you're just going to get fired. Like, I hate saying that. It always happens, but how often do we take the time to do it, to actually give them the moment to say, I know that I'm supposed to teach you this song, but what I actually need to teach you is how you learn it and why you learn it and those kind of things. And that has its value and merit in a way in music more than it does other places. And it helps. It's good to see the light at the end of the tunnel, but it's a long tunnel sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and all of that goes back to the entire purpose of this podcast, is you're giving the kids the tools to be able to do it without us.
Yeah.
And that's what we want. We want the music making to continue outside of the classroom, off the marching band field. We want those lifelong lovers, learners, players, makers of music.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Oh, this has been so fun. So if somebody wanted to learn more about your work, connect with you, things like that, how would they do that? So
I am the worst social media human being that ever existed. I have none. There's a Penn Ridge Marching Rams and a Penn Ridge Band's Twitter, which are run by, I have students that I kind of just like monitor to make sure they're good and they're doing their thing. And then my assistant director runs another one as well, where we post all of our stuff. If you search us on YouTube at all, we have a wonderful parents that put all of our performances up. And then in terms of work, most of the extra little things I've done, I haven't done too much with the mission statement stuff. I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to compile it. But I've done a decent amount with Marissa Gariello and Sarah Goulash over at fflat.com. So that fflatbooks.com is where I guess you could find some things that I've done. We co-wrote a book, but it's more interview things. So I'm not good at the social media game. I need to get better at it. It's volatile. I don't like it.
It's one more
Stay
thing,
away.
right?
It is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
And
I let the kids, I don't know how to Instagram or Vine or Snapchats or things like that. So they set it up and I make sure they're doing it appropriately and safely and things like that. And I let them run it. So Penn Ridge bands, anything Instagram and Twitter wise will pop up. So it's not directly me, but if anyone wants to get in contact with me individually, probably the best place is my email, which is just kfeher, Feher @penridge.org.
Perfect. And your podcast, as you mentioned, is what?
So our podcast is it's Musicast podcast, which is we work in partnership with F Flat Books. I'm actually starting to step away because we have a little one due at the end of April, and with the craziness of the marching band and jazz and things like that, at least for a little bit of a hiatus, I'm gonna pull back a little bit. But all of those episodes are up on F Flat Books. They're on Podcast Anywhere that you want to find it, and it's going to continue. It's just not going to continue in the same way with me. So I encourage people to definitely check it out. But I'm old news there.
Well, there are some great past episodes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would also second that recommendation to check it out. So
yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. We loved it. It's inspiring, exciting, just always great things to think about. So
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
all right. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. We'd also love for you to consider sharing this podcast with a friend and leaving a positive review. That's one of the best ways to get this message to new listeners.